Hi there, I'm Phoebe Calver, editor of American Whisky Magazine, and today I'm at the Overlook Bar at Hole Distillery with Kaveh Zamanian, the founder and whisky maker. So you've recently celebrated 10 years of Rabbit Hole. Could you even imagine when you first kicked off, when you first brought the idea to fruition that this is where you would be?
Honestly, no.
I like the honesty.
No. It started with a very modest vision. I was just thinking about it as a small craft distillery operation, but very quickly it started blossoming into a lot larger vision, because I realized that in order to have a brand that has impact, we need to be able to scale. And naturally the distillery kind of grew, and the team, and as a result really everything expanded, and it's been a pretty spectacular ride, but definitely didn't imagine it at first like this.
Definitely. And I feel like you've really, considering that was your initial idea, created this massive sensory experience for people to come and enjoy. As much as just finding out more about whiskey, they actually can experience art and different cultures and come up here and enjoy this amazing view. That's quite something to have achieved again in such a relatively short space of time, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you. I think the vision really initially was, how do we spread the word about bourbon? Make sure that we make distinct products that stand apart, but more importantly, bring people that are able to see the process in full view, and as a result get excited about bourbon and American whiskey. Because when I started thinking about Rabbit Hole, there was not a whole lot of knowledge and even excitement about bourbon or American whiskey, which was startling to me, to think how few Americans actually knew about bourbon. So the distillery and the experience was tailored in a way to make sure that we not only showcase, but make bourbon making sexy. So you come in and you're got a fully immersive experience, and on top of it you get to have the beautiful view of the river and downtown, and then it's a home run.
Definitely. And I think it makes such a difference when you have an amazing experience as you're tasting a whiskey. It really sticks in your mind, and you get so much more from it as well. But yeah, so for those people at home that don't know, what was the initial story in the early days of Rabbit Hole that brought you to the idea? Yeah,
I cut my teeth in the hospitality business, big fan of fine spirits, and started coming down to Kentucky nearly 20 years ago. My wife is from Kentucky, and that was my entree to the Commonwealth. And once I started digging in and learning more about bourbon, as I mentioned, I was really surprised how few people know about bourbon. And I thought that just bourbon is a spectacular whiskey expression, and realized that there's a gap in the market, in the sense that there's a lot of monotony, handful of distilleries making lion's share of the bourbon. And I thought that, very similar to the craft beer movement here in the States, there's an opportunity to reinvigorate bourbon by making one-of-a-kind expressions of whiskey, and I thought that I could do that. I had to change careers. I was a psychologist and shifted gears, so that was a big transition.
Change, yep.
Yeah, that was a pretty big transition. My wife was worried that I'm going to take the family down the rabbit hole. That's how the name came to be. The other piece of it was that I realized that within the parameters of what makes bourbon 51% corn, new charred containers, there's so much room for creativity. And it reminded me of the culinary tradition. The parallels, I think, between bourbon and the culinary process is really similar. So that was, to me, another light bulb moment when I thought that bourbon can be so much more. And I think if we take a page out of that culinary tradition, I can make whiskeys that are just extremely unique and organically bringing flavors to the forefront.
Absolutely. I think that is one of the really exciting things about what you're creating, is that you're very playful, and especially things like playing around with the mash bills and experimenting. How was that when you first started? I can imagine maybe slightly overwhelming to begin with.
Yeah, it was really overwhelming. And I think, that was actually one of the things that was probably created the most anxiety, because it's a lot easier to go buy source liquid and blend it. Relatively speaking, blending is an art. It's not an easy thing to do on its own, but not as risky as starting from scratch. So the idea of coming up with these recipes and not knowing how these expressions are going to turn out 4 or 5 years down the road was probably the most anxiety promoting part of it. But at the same time, high risk, high reward type of a mentality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way to go, clearly. I think I need to take note, I think. So this here, we've got your kind of staple of your staple 4 whiskies.
Yeah.
Would you mind sort of explaining the story of them,
Sure.
which came first? And
Yeah, so Cave Hill was the first expression. This is a 4-grain triple malt bourbon, Kentucky straight bourbon. I think initially the thinking was, how do I make a bourbon that is somewhat approachable from a flavor and taste standpoint? Corn already has that sweet base, so we have corn as the 70% of this mash bill is corn. Then we have 10% malted wheat, honey malted barley, and malted barley. And for me, the wheat and the honey malted barley were really the kind of combination that I thought would bring some of the sweeter, but also a little bit kind of subtle peaty notes as well. And not only make it a unique expression, but also a little bit more of an approachable bourbon.
Yeah.
Some people actually refer to it as the Scotch drinker's bourbon because of the amount of barley it has, and it's got a little bit of a kind of a peaty, smoky taste to it that complements that vanilla custard base of corn. So that was our first expression. I'm really proud of it. And another word about it is Cave Hill. Cave Hill is the name of a local cemetery here. It's a little morbid sometimes to think about cemetery as a name for whiskey.
Well, it's different.
That's true.
It sticks in your mind.
It is. But we have the most dead distillers buried in Cave Hill.
Oh, okay.
So it's the resting place of more distillers than anywhere else in the United States. And for me, it was a way of paying homage to all the great distillers that came before us. So, and that's Cave Hill.
Well, that's a very good reason to call it that. It's not morbid, you're fine. I think that's quite a bold statement you're making as well, with kind of throwing in those nods to Scotch as well, and really, quite a brave thing to kick off with. But I mean, it's worked really well. It's great whiskey, but
well, thanks. Yeah, I think using malted grains is one of the signature, if you would, things that we do here at Rabbit Hole. I just think it brings so much more flavor to the table, and also as a distiller and whiskey maker, gives us an opportunity to play around with different flavor profiles, just in a kind of an organic way, without obviously any flavoring added. Let the grains speak for themselves.
Absolutely.
So, then we have High Gold. This is another Kentucky straight bourbon, but this is a high rye. This is basically 70% corn. The balance of it is malted rye and malted barley. I used malted rye in this just to give a little bit of a subtle twist to a standard high rye Kentucky bourbon expression. I think the malted grains, again, bring some interesting characteristics to the forefront. Typically with the rye concentration on a bourbon like this, you'd get a lot of spice, but High Gold I think it's just a lot more well-rounded, and you get some of the kind of citrus floral notes that you don't typically get in a high rye bourbon.
No.
And High Gold is named after Christian Heigold, who was a German immigrant stonemaker. He was an artist, stonemaker, who lived in Louisville, and he was an immigrant, patriot, and his stonework is all around Louisville.
Amazing.
But most people don't know about him, so this is our way of shining light on his work and the beautiful stuff that he's done around our city.
Amazing. I love that. I also love that whiskey. I'm a high rye girl.
You do? Okay,
I
good.
do. I really do.
I am too. I love a nice rye punch.
Absolutely. So speaking of rye.
And speaking of rye, we have Boxer Grill, which is a 95.5 rye. As you know, and folks know, 95.5 is a pretty standard rye recipe. Larry Ebersol, who was actually one of my teachers, if you would, in those early days of my foray into whiskey making. But I wanted to do something a little different. So not only, obviously, it's made in Kentucky, but we used toasted and charred barrels for aging all the products. And one of the things that I tell folks is that if you compare our Boxer Grill rye with other rye whiskeys, you'll get a lot more floral, a lot more citrus. I actually get a lot of rose notes, which is very, very unique in a rye whiskey. And I think it's just, I'm a little partial, but I think it's pretty spectacular.
Absolutely.
And Boxer Grill is a little bit of a nod to the boxing tradition of Louisville, Kentucky. In addition to Muhammad Ali, we have some phenomenal boxers that came out of Louisville, and that's Boxer Grill.
Amazing.
And then last but not least is Derringer. Now that is a wheated bourbon that we finished in Pedro Jimenez sherry casks. It's quickly become a fan favorite. The wheat base, as you can imagine, it's already got a little bit of a kind of a sweeter profile, and then you add the Pedro Jimenez sherry casks that just takes it to a whole nother level. I think that it's just an outstanding, very versatile Kentucky straight bourbon, and the PX actually, interestingly enough, has opened it up where a lot of non-bourbon drinkers are kind of entering in with PX, which has been, again, a wonderful experience for us to help folks begin with Derringer and kind of move to different directions.
Definitely. I think that's such an important thing, to be able to offer people this range that, you know, from entry to somebody that's, you know, loved bourbon for years, they'll still love it. But, you know, you've got something for everyone there, which is
100%.
Brilliant. I'm sure the bar really appreciate it as well when they're coming up with menus. So
that's right, and that's the idea, right? That we're able to showcase what whiskey can be from a flavor profile standpoint, because the non-whiskey drinker kind of comes in and sometimes they get hit by the heat of the proof. Well, once that settles in and they're really able to train their palate, they can see the just versatility of whiskey, especially in our expressions.
Definitely. No, it's so interesting. And I think also, you know, clearly talking through the names, you really have a nod to your surroundings, you know, cultural references and the history of the area. And I think that's a really interesting part, especially when you come to the distillery and you see things like, you know, the deconstructed flag and your various pieces of art. You know, why was that such an important thing to you when you were kitting out the distillery?
Yeah, I think, you know, we're in the business of making whiskey, but I think ultimately it's about bringing people together. And when you bring people together to celebrate, and what better way to celebrate other than food and spirits? And in our case with spirits, you know, I feel like there's an opportunity for us to not only talk about whiskey and the art and science of whiskey making, but also some of the ancillary stories in some ways with our community, like the names, but through the artwork, you know, about some of the values that are really part and parcel of what Rabbit Hole is. You know, for me, ultimately, if we can bring people together around a glass of whiskey, we've made a huge accomplishment. And the artwork is another way of creating conversation when we're congregating and when we're celebrating. And to be able to talk about things that otherwise may not be as easy to talk about, you know. I think the flag piece that you talked about is an interesting example, because that piece was commissioned shortly after Donald Trump came into presidency, and one of the first things that he did was ban 7 Muslim countries to immigrate to the U.S. And without making a big to-do about it or making any explicit comments about that, I felt that it's important, because our values are about diversity and inclusivity. We commissioned an artist who deconstructed the flags of those 7 countries, as well as the U.S. flag. And you have essentially those 7 countries going horizontal, the U.S. flag's going vertical, and you stand back, it looks like the U.S. flag. You get close, you really see the range of colors coming together, which is just such a, I think, beautiful expression of our collective melting pot here in the U.S.
Absolutely.
And we are a country of immigrants, and And I think, again, it's a way of creating conversation and getting people to start maybe reflecting on things that otherwise they might not reflect about.
I do think, I completely agree that whiskey is a great equalizer, and it can make you feel like you're in a safe space to discuss things. I think that's really important. It's not just, a spirit. It's very easy to forget that sometimes, I think, as well. It really is something to bring people together. So it's lovely to see that reflected here. Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, a motto is drink less, drink better. It's
good
not
motto.
Good whiskey is not about getting drunk. It's
No.
about really enjoying the spirit, but also being able to be in a social setting where you're sharing with friends and family.
Absolutely. And leaning more onto the whiskey, you've created sort of a distillery series or distillers series, and you've also, you've got these amazing artworks on your bottles as well. Could you kind of talk me through how these ideas came to be?
Yeah, so I was a psychologist for 20 years, and one of the things that I learned through my training and then through practice of how important creativity is. And I feel that as human beings, there's a few things that are essential to good health. And one of them is our ability to be able to create. I think if we don't do something that's of meaning or create something that's of meaning, we have a tendency to fall ill, simply put, And along those lines, I feel that celebrating creativity and supporting artists and illustrators is part of what I envisioned Rabbit Hole could do. And as an offshoot of that, we felt that the single barrel program that we have is a wonderful opportunity to create a different package where it gives the most canvas to showcase various artists and illustrators from around the world. And they do things that are, again, very interpretive. I think good work is about interpretation of whatever the human experience might be. And that was the thinking behind it. So the single barrel artist series is now slowly expanding and growing, and we have illustrators from all over the world that we're partnering with, doing reinterpretations of works of Lewis Carroll, to works of Shakespeare, to celebrating some of the landmarks in our hometown. All of them, again, in the spirit of trying to create conversation around good whiskey.
Absolutely.
And in the process, shedding light on some other great creative people around the world.
Definitely. And is this something that you're planning to continue? And just it will be something that you're always going to do? Or
Yeah. The single barrel program is gonna be separate package, really focused on these types of artist collaborations. Right now, we have probably about, I want to say conservatively, about 50 artists on the docket.
Wow.
And we're trying to lay it out, program it for the next several years. The main criteria is having people that are creating original works and they have something personal to say. That's what I think is great art, as opposed to a craft, which is, not just about, if you would, copying or duplicating. What I'm really interested in is the artist's vision and how they're taking, for example, Alice from Alice in Wonderland and giving their own interpretation of what Alice represents to them. And same thing with Shakespeare plays and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's obviously, reaching this 10-year milestone. What do you envision for the next 10 years and obviously long into the future after that? But, obviously a lot's changed, so.
Yeah, I think, for Rabbit Hole, immediately, I'm really excited about the international market. We have opened up UK, Canada, South Korea, and we're about to open up France and a handful of other countries around the world. The idea of being able to get out there and showcase and share bourbon, particularly Rabbit Hole bourbon, with people around the world is extremely exciting to me, because I feel that there's an opportunity for us to be ambassadors to the world and to be able to get people to notice bourbon in a way that they haven't really historically. So that's really exciting. I think the other piece that for me is exciting is that now I'm at a point with our partnership with Pernod Ricard where we've been working together as partners for 3 years. And to establish Rabbit Hole as an innovation hub, if you would, for American whiskey and Pernod is an exciting, I think, development. So there's a couple other projects that are in the pipeline that I can't talk about yet, but are really, really exciting, and hopefully I can circle back with you soon and tell you more about it.
Fingers crossed. I love that, the way you phrase that as well, like the innovation hub. I think that's really exciting, and especially considering how, you know, the way you approached it when you first started. Innovation was clearly running in the blood, I think so.
Yeah, and you know, in the distillery, the beauty of the facility, when I tell, when people come and visit, I try to emphasize that it was designed for innovation in the sense that it's craft that's able to be scaled. That's the way I look at it. So it's set up in a way where we only do 23, 24 barrels a batch when we're making it. When we're bottling it, we're only blending 15 barrels at a time. But at the same time, collectively, we're able to scale it up to 27,000 barrels a year. So it's a really wonderful, if you would, setup here where we can do small batch expressions and experiment with different things. And if it goes well and we like it, we can scale it up if we want to.
Absolutely. So it kind of really keeps what the core important things that you started out with here, but gives you lots of opportunities. That's exciting.
That's right. That's right.
And then obviously I do need to bring up the fact that tomorrow you'll be inducted into the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame. I mean, congratulations.
Thank you.
How does that feel?
Honestly, it's I don't think it's sunk in yet. It's pretty surreal. It's incredible. I think that I'm anticipating getting very emotional tomorrow because it's just I think it happened so fast. I think that this is the year where I think the folks that voted were all Hall of Fame inductees. This is what I just learned, which has made me feel even, I don't know what the right word is. I'm even getting more emotional thinking about it, because to be named in by folks that I admire and respect means so much. So it's just, I'm a little at a loss for words there. It's exciting. It's an honor. It's a privilege, and you know, I just hope that I can make the guys that named me proud, and we keep doing good things. I hope to come.
Well, I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, so this is a part of our Founders series. Now, we release Founders twice a year, in the fall and spring. And this is our spring release this past year. This is a 16-year-old finished in French oak barrels. Now, obviously, Rabbit Hole has not been around for 16 years. So going back to those early days when my wife was very nervous about these recipes, as I was talking to some consultants, they were saying, well, you know, might as well buy some barrels in case you don't want to release your own recipes. You got something to fall back on. Of course, we did well with the recipes, and these barrels basically sat aging. And slowly, there's not a whole lot of them. There was only about maybe 50, 60 barrels, but we've kept them, and slowly we made some releases, and this is one of them. So this was actually a blend of 15-year-old Kentucky straight bourbon from various distilleries that I had purchased. And then we aged it for an additional year in brand new French oak, toasted and charred French oak barrels. And it just got released this last spring, and love to get your feedback, get your reaction.
Well, let's have a little tip. Okay. This is giving me kind of all of the fruit cake and really rich brandy kind of covering the Christmas cake. That's sort of one. And I'm already feeling festive, so this isn't going to make it even worse.
A little heads up, it is about almost 116 proof. It's cask strength. So it's 115.8 actually, to be exact.
Packs a punch.
Yeah.
Going in. Considering that's the proof, that is very smooth.
Yeah.
And it's actually not, I mean, you get the gentle warmth, but what's it, the Kentucky hug?
You get
Is
the
that
Kentucky hug,
Yeah.
but it's very gentle and
It
very
is.
nice. Yeah,
Oh, it's gorgeous.
thank you.
And really velvety.
Yeah,
And that's-
it is.
yeah.
It just, and it's a really nice, long, lingering finish. Yeah, I get a lot of the kind of dried fruit
Absolutely.
flavors.
Yeah,
It's
it's also
pretty-
kind of like a toffee pudding towards the end as well,
Yeah.
sticky toffee pudding, that kind of thing. Oh no.
Well, I'm glad we were able to
Yeah,
share
indeed.
it. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers to you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.